These are the ruins of the ancient Maya, flourished from the time of Christ to AD 900. At their height, Maya settlements spanned southern Mesoamerica, from the Yucatan in the north to El Salvador in the south. The Maya left behind dozens of cities, marked by tall pyramids and imposing statues. These remnants offered a portrait of the Maya elite. But archaeologist Payson Sheets was seeking a broader picture.
We want to deal with the common people, the people who are doing the farming, who are making the pottery, who are doing the work for supporting society. And it's about time we know something about them, how they lived. Were they really exploited? Were they living lives of desperation, just barely eking out an existence under the oppressive machinery of an exploitative government? Or were their lives fairly rich? Did they have things of beauty in their houses? How did they live? Did they have a variety of foods stored in their houses? Were they scrunched into scuzzy little spaces, or did they have some open areas and a comfortable life? That's what we're working on.
Sometimes an archaeologist's search is helped by accident. In El Salvador, a bulldozer digging a foundation for a grain silo stumbled upon an old house. Could this be the evidence that Sheets was looking for?
People in the area had seen well-preserved floor, good artifacts on the inside, thatch roof collapsed down onto the floor, but perfectly preserved. They all thought it's a recent house under a recent volcanic eruption. When I came here, I thought exactly the same thing, but being curious about things, I decided I'd like to know what it dated to. So pulling out my trusty trowel and scraping along the floor right along here, I found some pieces of pottery, but the pieces of pottery were all prehistoric, classic period pottery. I was looking for a Coke bottle, a piece of plastic, some tin foil, something to give me an idea what the date of the structure was. Only prehistoric pottery. So immediately I perceived a powerful opportunity to really embarrass myself professionally by saying, well, it's prehistoric, it's fantastic, total preservation. Decided a little bit of caution here before doing that, and submitted a series of thatch samples for radiocarbon dating, and they all came back with an age of about 1,400 years.
In Ceren, El Salvador, archaeologists had stumbled upon a rare find, a building made from mud and thatch that should have disintegrated centuries ago. But here it was. How could it have been preserved for so long? The 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens provides a picture of what happened in Ceren 1,400 years ago.
You'd hear a big explosion because it happened all at once, and you'd see a huge black cloud coming at you. When it hit you, it would hit with the temperature of boiling water, so it would actually scald the skin, and your first deep breath would be your last breath.
Day after day, the volcano at Ceren spewed tons of searing ash across the countryside. Everything within 5 kilometers was buried beneath the ash. The homes of the Maya were destroyed. Ironically, their way of life was preserved.
People didn't abandon their things, they left things exactly where they'd placed them. And we have an opportunity to study people, their individual activities, what they did, their successes, their failures, their frustrations. And so it's an opportunity to study people and families like we've not had before in this area of the New World.
In a test pit, the team looks for buried structures. And still more houses lie beneath the sugarcane. After days of digging, the test pit is 3 meters deep. The workers have found a large piece of wood. It may be the remains of a roof timber.
¿Qué han encontrado? ¿En la esquina? No, allí. Ahí no va. Algo grande.
Using the test pit method, the team finds evidence of at least 7 buried structures. Full excavation begins. Slowly, meticulously, the team begins to remove the volcanic ash. Weeks later, the ancient floors emerge, yielding the first clues of how these rooms were used.
So anyway, we're really glad to find this. It's certainly not any one of your super elegant, towering pyramids like a Tikal, but for our purposes, super important to know where they actually did their cooking. They've got round bottom pots, and what they do is they'd rest one of these round bottom pots on the 3 points of contact. You put firewood in from the side. The people in the area still do that, and I think it's impressive to watch them constantly adjusting. Instead of going to the range and adjusting the amount of gas or electricity there, they're turning the firewood and keeping the fire just right.
Here, in another structure, the team excavates a storeroom. Usually, archaeologists find only fragments of pots, but in Ceren, huge vessels survive intact, protected for centuries by the soft ash. Amazingly, inside these vessels, the archaeologists find carbonized cacao seeds, squash, chilies, and beans.
Bingo.
The preservation at Ceren is remarkable. Bit by bit, the team reconstructs the ancient Maya diet. In the storeroom, archaeologist Andrea Gersel measures the remains of a basket that once held corn.
Corn cobs have been found in dry caves where no deterioration takes place, and you get a lot of detail in those instances. But in tropical climates, you wouldn't expect to find any remains at all. The level of preservation here is excellent, and it's because the corn was coated by a layer of superfine ash. That superfine ash was moist and hardened into a shell around the corn, and then the corn rotted away, leaving a hollow space. When we fill that hollow space with dental plaster, we can recover all of the details of the corn cob, even though we can't touch the corn cob itself, the original corn cob. This area is incredibly lush. It's incredibly rich, and the variety of plants and foods, just wild foods that can be collected here today, is marvelous. I imagine 1,400 years ago, the variety was at least as great. And so I don't think living here would have been very difficult at all.
At Ceren, household members grew their own food and made their own tools, pottery, and clothes. We usually think of subsistence farming as difficult and impoverished. But the evidence emerging at Ceren challenges these assumptions.
Quite frankly, we are surprised by the richness of material possessions in a fairly broad sense. Beautiful polychrome painted gourds, and the amount of food they had stored in the house is fairly impressive, and the range of foods. They're not just scrounging, not just sort of eking out an existence. They're really living quite well.
It's a monkey tail. Look at that.
From mouse bones to axe blades, the details of daily life preserved at Ceren astonish the archaeologists. But it is only a beginning. It will take several seasons to excavate the remains of an entire household, and several decades to excavate the entire community. The community buried beneath the sugarcane of Ceren may one day be unearthed. But other sites in the Maya region offer what Ceren lacks, evidence of ancient households easily seen on the surface.
Mira, Arturo. 1, 2, 3 piedras. Por favor.
Here in Honduras, the survey team combs the Copan Valley. Their trained eyes recognize mounds of grass-covered stones as the remnants of ancient Maya dwellings.
Okay. Here's the road, like this. Here's where we came in, small road. And we walked around this way, and we walked over into this pasture. And so this site is right about here, right on this little hill.
The Copan Valley lies 100 kilometers north of Ceren. In 1975, archaeologists began a complete survey of the valley, on foot. After 10 years of painstaking work, they have discovered the remains of 4,500 structures.
Más a usted, 5 centímetros.
Archaeologist William Sanders has been leading excavations in the Copan Valley since 1980.
We decided to do a series of large-scale excavations out in the countryside to get an idea what the farming population was like, what kind of houses did they live in, what was their lifestyle like. Probably 80% of the population of Copan was in that social category.
Unlike Ceren, the ancient houses of Copan have been exposed to centuries of erosion. Very few artifacts remain intact or in their original location. Still, the team finds significant clues. In one structure, the team discovers a raised platform of stone, the remnants of a sleeping bench. In another, they find evidence for a kitchen, shattered obsidian blades that once were knives, and broken pieces of pottery that were once used for cooking. The layout of ancient Maya houses is quite different from our own. The Maya constructed separate buildings for sleeping, cooking, and storing food. They organized these buildings around patios.
After 2 seasons of work up here, what can we say? Well, we have almost fully excavated a complete Maya settlement, which consisted of 2 adjoining patio groups of houses. We have 2 kitchens that are separated from the houses and 1 possible storage building. The social group here is clearly a larger one than the nuclear family, and the question is, what is the relationship among the members of those 4 nuclear families?
How do archaeologists reconstruct family relationships from the remains of kitchens and storerooms? To pursue his search, Sanders turns to the Maya of today. The excavations in the Copan Valley revealed many clusters of houses surrounded by agricultural fields. Comparing today's Belize households to the archaeological remains, William Sanders believes that many of the ancient Copan residents also lived in extended families.
The advantage of this kind of organization is that there are a variety of work tasks that you can share. There are certain phases of the agricultural season, for example, where it's very important to do a job as fast as possible. For example, planting. You don't want to spread planting over a week. You want to get it done in 1 or 2 days. That means you have to mobilize labor. And if you're a poor peasant, how are you going to mobilize labor? Well, you share it. And you live together in that relatively close cluster of dwellings because it's more convenient to organize this type of labor. And it's based on kinship because these people have grown up together. They learn how to work together from children. And so it's the easiest kind of organization to have for that type of task.
The Pyramid of the Sun. The Pyramid of the Moon. The Avenue of the Dead. These are the crowning achievements of Teotihuacan, one of the largest cities in all of the ancient world. At its height, as many as 125,000 people may have lived here. For nearly 1,000 years, between 100 BC and AD 750, Teotihuacan controlled the basin of Mexico. Today, much of the ancient city is covered by cactus and cornfields. When the city grew, farming was pushed to the edges of the urban center, and these fields were covered with residences. Archaeologist Dolph Widmer has studied Teotihuacan for more than a decade.
Well, one of the amazing things about Teotihuacan is that it's a city, and even though right now it's an agricultural field, it's just, you see cactus everywhere, you can still tell it's a city because the surface of the ground is littered with artifacts. They're everywhere. We can see that we have a site. Here I have cultural material like this piece of obsidian, a piece of ceramics. All this stuff here tells me that people lived here. And by noting the artifacts on the surface, I can get an idea of how big their residences were, how many residents there were in the city as a whole, and get some idea of the size and number of people that lived here.
During the 1960s, archaeologists surveyed the entire city, revealing an urban grid as deliberate as the streets of Manhattan. A total of 2,600 buildings lined densely packed streets. 80% of these were residential compounds. These compounds enclosed numerous sleeping rooms, patios, and kitchens. Archaeologists estimate that 30 to 100 people could be housed in a single compound. Were these like modern apartment buildings, where strangers live together by chance? Or was there a thread of kinship connecting the residents of these large compounds? What clues were left behind of Teotihuacan's families? Archaeologist Michael Spence.
We usually bury in cemeteries, set apart from the places where the people lived. That makes it difficult to tie them back into their living quarters. In Teotihuacan, fortunately, the people were buried within the apartment compound. Some of them were buried in open spaces like patios. These would have been particularly important individuals. But many of them were buried under the floors of the rooms that they had actually lived in. So in Teotihuacan, we have the possibility of using these skeletons to try and detect relationships within the apartment compound.
Thousands of boxes line the walls of a laboratory in Mexico's National Anthropology Museum. This is where skeletal remains from excavations at Teotihuacan and other sites are stored. Looking for evidence of ancient kinship, Spence came here to analyze 81 skeletons from a single residential compound known as La Ventilla.
Well, I analyzed them for a series of traits, about a dozen traits. These traits we think are partially genetic in origin, not completely, but partially. And hopefully by analyzing these traits, we might be able to say something about the relationships between individuals in the population. For example, you see this hole here over the eye. Some vessels passed through that hole, and we think that that's perhaps partially genetic. On this skeleton, this is a female, you can see a notch instead. So the vessels are passing through a notch. And that's one variation. There are others. Here, for example, in this mandible, you can see a groove running along here, but it's covered over by a bridge. On this one, let's see, there's the groove, but there's no bridge.
Comparing the bones from La Ventilla, Spence came upon some startling results. Similar traits recurred frequently among the male skeletons. For example, 18 out of 20 male skulls had a hole directly over the eye socket.
I think this means that La Ventilla then, the social group occupying La Ventilla, was based on a core of related males, related male kinsmen, and that the females in the area had married in there from a variety of different places.
So the 2,000 compounds of Teotihuacan were not apartment buildings filled with strangers, but the households of large kin groups. 30 to 100 relatives all living together. Great-grandparents, grandparents, brothers, uncles, cousins. This kind of extended family is what is called a lineage.
A lineage is a group of people related either through the male line or the female line, but it's more than just that. These people usually live together, they will work together, they often own land in common, and they'll probably have some identity as a distinct religious group too.
Were the lineages of Teotihuacan unified by religion? Again, household excavations provided answers. Physical anthropologist Rebecca Story.
In all the compounds that have been excavated, there has always been a central courtyard, and in the middle of it, we generally find some kind of architectural feature. Now, in this particular compound, it's a very elaborate and very beautiful one. Look at the detailing on the stone, and also look at the little ornaments on top of it. There are fragments to show us that it once was plastered and painted, so we have to remember that it would have been completely brighter and much more colorful and really looked splendid.
These strange and splendid structures were altars. But who was being worshipped here? In 1980, Rebecca Story and Dolph Whitmer excavated a residential compound in a neighborhood of the city now called Tlahinga. The evidence showed people had lived in the compound for close to 500 years. Underneath the central altar, archaeologists discovered several skeletons, buried decades apart.
When we excavated under the central courtyards of Tlahinga, we found a series of human burials. Now, Tlahinga was actually a rather modest compound, probably people we would think of as relatively poor in the whole city, and yet the most elaborate offerings that were found with anybody were with these individuals. This person here was buried with an awful lot of marine shell, including a beautiful headdress made out of very elaborate rattlesnake pattern.
Marine shell was an expensive item for the ancient residents because it had to be imported. It took days of travel on foot to bring goods like these from the coast to the city.
This means that all through the history of the Tlahinga compound, individuals, important individuals, were buried with a lot of ceremony and a lot of elaborate offerings under the altar. And it was quite clear that they were fairly old from several pieces of evidence, including from this jaw. For instance, you can see this individual has lost all their teeth. They have filled back in because they were lost quite some time ago. I could also tell from the sex that they were practically all males except for one female. Putting all the evidence together of the age, the sex of the individuals, and the elaborate offerings, it looks like they were very important people in the compound who were buried in a special place with a lot of reverence and ceremony and wealth. That means probably that they were heads or other important people in the compound, and they were placed on the altar deliberately so that they could be venerated or worshipped by the residents of the compound as ancestors.
This is Huehue Teotl, the god of the hearth, protector of the household's fertility and well-being. This icon was found along with the ancestor burials in the central courtyard of Tlahinga. The evidence of altars and burials showed that ancestor worship played a fundamental role in organizing the lineage compound. Like Teotihuacan, many cultures throughout the world have been organized by lineages, from the Iroquois of North America, to the Nuer of East Africa, to the Chinese. But why did the lineage members at Teotihuacan live together in a single household? In a laboratory at Teotihuacan, Dolph Whitmer measures potsherds thousands of years old. His team collected more than 1 million of these at Tlahinga. Measuring the fragments, Widmer discovers a remarkable similarity in size. Looking for explanations, he examined the methods of modern potters. The lineage compound of Tlahinga made thousands of these pots. Their neighbors specialized in other goods, like obsidian blades and clay figurines. Archaeologists have detected craft workshops in more than 800 compounds. In contrast to the relative self-sufficiency of the households in Ceren and Copan, Teotihuacanos were engaged in a web of trading. Teotihuacan households were large because they were not only providing for themselves, but producing goods for the marketplace. Teotihuacan is known for its achievements in crafts and architecture, but economic growth causes strains on kin relations. The lineage ties which bound the households of Teotihuacan through worship and work were frayed by increasing wealth.
Probably through time, as some lineages got wealthier than others, then all of a sudden some people would probably attach themselves to a wealthy lineage that they weren't related to, just in order to work with them and have a better life than they could if they stayed with just their own lineage. This kind of thing happens, I think, all the time.
Over time, the interior design of the house compounds changed. Wealthier household members enlarged their rooms and painted them with elegant murals, while others in the household saw their living space shrink. In the Maya city of Copan, a jeweler fashioned rare shell and jade for his powerful lord. In Mexico, living artisans echo the economy of a vanished civilization. And in Teotihuacan, evidence of mass production has now been unearthed. Tiny faces of clay reflect the men and women who made them 1,000 years ago. Archaeologists find evidence of specialization everywhere, in the buildings and sculpture of ancient cities, and in crafts like elegant jade earrings, decorated pottery, and even skulls with jade inlays in their teeth. These craft items were all made by specialists who worked at the ancient Maya city of Copan. Between AD 400 and 800, this magnificent city flourished as one of the major centers of Maya art and culture. Copan was built in a broad mountain valley on the western border of Honduras. At its height, the economic system of the Copan kingdom supported a population of some 27,000 people. A tiny percentage of them were the nobility, the elite of Maya society. They were the ones for whom the fine objects were made. To better understand the economy of Copan, archaeologists must discover who made these beautiful objects and how the elites acquired them. No one knew the answers until it was discovered that a catastrophe had occurred here 1,000 years ago. For the Maya, the earthquake was a calamity. But for archaeologist Dolph Widmer, it was an opportunity.
When the roof collapsed, it did something wonderful. It collected for us, in the place that they originally used, a whole series of artifacts and tools. And these were found right here in this room. This room has sealed underneath this collapsed roof the first evidence we've ever found of the production of elite craft items. Items such as shell, jade, other exotic materials. On this bench, we found 3 ceramic vessels. And the vessel over here had a quiver of tools in it. We found bone tools and chisels. Also, we found numerous other artifacts in their original place, just like they're being used. And this is this Pompeii effect, if you want to call it, is very exciting to us. For the first time, we had captured and preserved right before us a Mayan artisan workshop.
In the workshop were 10 obsidian saw blades. Obsidian is a natural volcanic glass. The artisans would have used the blades to cut and saw.
I suspect that saws were taken and mounted into a handle, something like this. One of the problems with obsidian is that it's very sharp, but it's very brittle, and it needs support.
The blades would have been used together with this stone, which functioned as a cutting platform. And the Maya used this piece of deer antler to drill holes.
What an artisan would do is place a little bit of sand in a slurry on a spot of bone, take it and start to perforate it.
The drills would have made holes for the jade in these teeth. But one item uncovered had far more significance than mere decoration.
This is a star gorget. It was produced from a marine conch or whelk, which was imported from the Gulf Coast, and it's a very special artifact among the Maya. I think, of course I'm biased, but it's probably the most spectacular artifact that's yet been found. But let me tell you where my bias lies. This is the symbol of the Powhatan or the Bacabs. These are the gods of the underworld.
Bacabs and Powhatuns were the Maya gods who held up the earth and the sky. They were also the patrons of scribes. Bacabs, wearing the star, were found carved on a throne in a large house near the workshop. The house belonged to an important noble thought to have been a scribe. Was the star being made for him? The artisan's workshop is right next door to the house of the noble. Was there some kind of relationship between the two? There were not yet enough clues until preparations began for the reconstruction of the workshop, directed by project architect Rudy Larios. When Larios began digging into the foundation, he made a startling discovery.
On dismantling the wall, we quickly found some stones that appeared very strange, and a small slope in the west part of the room. When we investigated further, we found this.
Larios had discovered a hidden tomb beneath the artisan's workshop. The tomb had been reused at various times, and several bodies were discovered, one on top of the other. The skeletons were removed from the tomb and taken to the laboratory at Copan. They were analyzed by physical anthropologist Rebecca Story.
There were actually 5 people buried in what was a very large stone-lined tomb with capstones and everything. And it actually had 2 chambers, and 3 people were in one of the chambers and 2 were in the other. Now, the interesting one I have here is the last one, the very last one placed on top. Now, we do know that this individual was an active individual because of his bones. For example, here is one of the humerus or upper arm bone, right here. Comes from right here. The bones of your skeleton have rough places and crests where your muscles and ligaments attach. And of course, as you use those muscles, you very often get a corresponding development upon the crests of the bone.
Crests grow when the muscles attached to them are used. Enlarged crests of the arm bone indicate frequent arm movements, like those used by an artisan. But this skeleton had a greater story to tell. The shape of the skull has been intentionally deformed. The forehead has been pushed back. This is the shape of a normal skull compared with the skull found in the tomb. The deformed skull tells story that this person was not just a humble artisan, but could have been someone of noble rank.
This head deformation had to be done when you are a baby, or else you will injure the brain as it grows. Therefore, a newborn has to have their head tied, and the tying probably lasts about a couple of years to get this effect. Now, this at Copan is a mark of rank. Only nobles or elites have this kind of head deformation, and obviously it was a lifelong. People could tell that you were born an elite because of the shape of your head. So there was almost no way, as it were, to pass for an elite in classic Maya society, because if your head wasn't right, everybody knew you had not been born a noble.
So the artisan himself is a member of Copan's elite, the same class as the noble for whom he is working, and he lives in a residence compound dominated by the noble. The compound is laid out as groups of houses, each around its own courtyard or patio. This is the location of the workshop. The patios are interconnected and focus on the main patio and the house of the noble. The noble is the head of the compound. He is the patron of everyone living here. David Webster is the archaeologist who excavated much of the noble's house.
This man probably had about 200 to 300 people who were dependent on him in some way, including his wives, his brothers, his political retainers, his economic specialists, living in this patio group and the other patio groups. They're buried here. There are about 250 or 300 burials here, which are the people who were his dependents. And essentially what this is an elaborate household.
The Maya noble could support his household because he controlled the rich farmland surrounding the compound. The land was so fertile it could produce a surplus, which fed the noble's dependents, including specialists like the artisans, who were not themselves farmers. This was the basis of the economic system of the elites in ancient Copan. For the noble, the system worked well. The more dependents he controlled, the more powerful he appeared. But the system also created a problem. What was he to do with such a large family of elites?
I suspect that one of the things is, what do you do with these people? These people are too noble, they're too elite, they have too high a social position to be menial farmers. So what you do is you provide them with elite patios, and you have them be your priests, you have them be your artisans, you have them be your tailors that make your costumes and your featherwork. And that's what we see in this patio. That's what we have here.
So the Lord supports his extended household, and in return, they produce goods exclusively for him. This is specialization, but not one based on buying and selling. It was a closed economic relationship, so limited to a family that it had little effect on the economy of the larger community. But what about the larger community? Ordinary people living outside the urban center. People who would never have access to jade and rare seashells. What of their economy? Archaeologists begin their search not where the common people live, but here, in the neighborhood of the elite. This is an excavation of an elite compound organized by David Webster and William Sanders.
The tomb she found on the other building was right along the front of the terrace.
From sculptures just uncovered, they suspect the leader of this family was another powerful lord.
I'm standing in the courtyard of a residential compound of a classic Maya noble. There are about 45 of these compounds up and down the valley, the sort of middle class of ancient classic Maya society here. Behind me are two buildings. The one on the right, we're almost certain is a residence, perhaps of the lord of this compound. And then the one on the left, the bigger one over there, most probably is a temple, perhaps his funerary temple. But what we're going to do now is look at a pile of trash behind the building here.
Sanders and Webster have just uncovered a midden, typical Maya garbage dumped outside of what was presumably the kitchen. For Sanders, one item in this trash raises important questions about the economic system of Copan.
This is a piece of a matadi here. This is the basic milling stone that the ancient Maya used to grind corn on. They would boil the corn in those pots, and then they would put it on the matadi, and then they would take a rolling pin-shaped piece of stone like this, and the woman would grind the boiled corn up and down like that until she made it into a dough. And then, of course, the dough would be used to make tortillas.
Matates are still in common use all over Mesoamerica by rich and poor alike. There were so many matates in ancient Copan that some people today are using ones that are 1,000 years old, which they just found lying on the ground.
If you look at this one closely, you'll notice how thin it is here. That's because the matati has gotten very worn. And from that constant grinding on the surface, they get thinner and thinner in the center. And then finally they snap in half, which is what's happened here. There's no evidence that any of these objects were manufactured here. And so a fundamental question that we're trying to answer in the Copan project is, who made these objects and how did the consumers down here on the valley floor get them?
Archaeological surveys of the Copan Valley identified 1,400 ancient house compounds. More than two-thirds of them were located outside the urban core. Sanders knew several of these were located near the quarry, so he decided to excavate 2 of them. On an isolated hillside far from the elite neighborhoods of Copan, the team began work at a site they called Petapilla, the name of the nearby stream. Archaeologists think that most of the people who lived here were probably farmers struggling to survive on poor land. The houses they built here were hardly impressive. Just a row or two of stones as a foundation for what were probably pole and thatch houses. But something unusual was going on here, because as the workers scraped away dirt from the floor of the compound's main house, pieces of matates and manos began popping up everywhere. In all, the team collected more than 400 fragments of manos and matates. But these were not like the broken ones usually found in Maya trash.
One of the interesting things about the matates that we found in Petapilla is that at least half of them show no signs of wear at all. Some of them are blanks that were never finished. Perhaps they were broken during the process of manufacturing them. Others are complete, but for some reason never left the point of manufacture. They never were distributed to whoever the consumers were. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. This is a piece of a matati, but that surface is completely rough. It's never been ground by the action of a mano on its surface. Over here is what looks like a partly processed mano, which was not carried all the way down to the completion of the work. It's much too big and too massive. Here's one that is just like it, except that it's fully manufactured. It's down to the level that it can be used. And if you look at it, you can see that all of the surface is roughed. It has not been ground against the surface of a matati yet. And so we have this interesting situation in both of these groups out there at Petapilla where half the matatis we found were unused. The other half were matatis that they probably made themselves, but then they used in their ordinary household activities.
So Sanders has found his matati makers. But what can they tell him about the economy of the ancient people? On the spectrum from simple to complex, where might their system fall? He still does not know the answers to a number of important questions. How were matatis made? And who distributed them? Could these people have earned a living making matatis? Sharing the sun with ancient Copan was another city whose economy was so complex it became a wonder of the ancient world. That city was Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan, founded more than 2,000 years ago. Around AD 600, at the height of its power, this magnificent city held at least 125,000 people, 5 times the population of the entire kingdom of Copan. Although contemporary with Copan, Teotihuacan was a separate civilization unto itself. Located just northeast of modern Mexico City, Teotihuacan had enormous influence over all of Mesoamerica.
Teotihuacan at its peak in the 8th century AD was the largest city in the New World. It's also one of the largest cities in human history before the Industrial Revolution. Teotihuacan is also a unique archaeological site in a number of characteristics: its architecture and the size of that urban area, plus the fact that it is a supremely ordered and organized and planned community.
Teotihuacan was an impressive model of urban planning. Radiating from central avenues lined with pyramids and temples, Teotihuacan contained more than 2,000 nearly identical house compounds. Archaeologists now believe the compounds also served as workshops. The unique design of the compounds created buildings which used public and private space efficiently. Each compound housed 30 to 100 people. Each was divided into 4 or more private apartments surrounding a common courtyard. Here, the Teotihuacanos worked at their craft specializations, like the making of clay figurines. Thousands of such figurines have been found all over Teotihuacan. Archaeologists suspect that they had some kind of religious function, but are not sure what. It is curious that almost all were found broken and thrown away in the trash. Archaeologist Warren Barber is trying to figure out why.
Figurines were found primarily in refuse, I think for a number of possible reasons. First, they may have lost their sanctity and they had to be constantly replaced, so you just toss them out. If they were used for a particular ritual on a particular fiesta of a particular month, and then you'd sort of a planned obsolescence where they'd have to be replaced constantly. Secondly, they may have been purposely broken. Some of my colleagues believe that these were used and then purposely broken. And the other possibility, which sometimes I grip the bed at night thinking about, is that perhaps some of these are just toys and may have been person-handled by kids, and to the point that they break very easily.
Barber has discovered that many of the fragments were actually the parts of marionettes. Their arms and legs would have been attached by string. Large figures are called hosts because the body always contains one or more guests inside. Archaeologists think that at first each family made their own figurines by hand. But then Barber discovered an important change took place.
Between 250 and 350 AD, the mold was introduced into figurine making in Teotihuacan, slowly replacing handmade figurines completely. During the latter part of the city's life, you have a combination often of handmade and mold made together. But by the end, we have a type called the half-conical that are very elaborately painted representations of perhaps deities and perhaps high-status individuals.
Unlike the earlier versions, this figurine was completely mold-made. Nevertheless, it is highly detailed, but only on the front.
No care was taken in the manufacturing of the back after they were pressed into the mold. You can see nicks and dings, and often you find fingerprints along the backs of these half-conical figurines.
These figurines may represent the first instance of mass production in the New World. The growth of the industry also symbolizes the growth of the city. Archaeologists believe population size, along with density, has a critical effect on the economy of a city.
Once you get 90,000 people in one place or 60,000 people in one place, then it has a self-generating kind of impact on its structure. All those people living here means that it's going to stimulate economic specialization. Economic specialization itself then is going to change the character of the city.
Was increased specialization actually changing life in Teotihuacan? Warren Barber began to think the tiny faces would yield an answer.
During my dissertation research, I occasionally would run across figurines that had fingerprints, and they sort of added a humanity to my work, and I started looking for them, and they sort of brought me closer to the manufacturer of the print. I started wondering who he was, and I figured I would never be able to find that, and I started wondering whether or not I could find something else out about them.
Barber's curiosity led him to the modern science of fingerprints, where he discovered that with a large enough sample, he might be able to discern the gender of the person who made the print. Males have wider ridges, females have narrower ones. Through trial and error, he devised a technique to make permanent molds of the fingerprints. From these, he began to construct his sample. Finally, an intriguing discovery: direct evidence that one set of workers was being replaced by another.
It appears that the early handmade figurines were made by females. After the establishment of apartment compounds in Teotihuacan, about 250 AD, you get a shift to wider ridges on the late handmade figurines and the early mold-made figurines. So it appears that when you have the development of the apartment compound, that males come into the industry.
So as the city grew, the figurine industry changed. Initially worked by women, probably as part of their domestic duties, it became a separate, full-time specialization performed by men. With men moving into industry and doing less farm work, how would the city be able to feed itself? In Copan, everybody farmed, except the elite and their artisans. Part of the answer is found in an elaborate system of irrigation, canals that help the city produce a large agricultural surplus. Although most remain farmers, irrigation freed some 30,000 to 40,000 people to pursue other jobs, like making clay figurines. But it was not clay sculpture that transformed Teotihuacan into an economic superpower. It was another material, obsidian, a natural volcanic glass whose edge was as sharp as a razor. Obsidian was the knife of the ancient world. "30 miles north of Teotihuacan, archaeologists have discovered the major source of obsidian in a place called Pachuca. This is Alejandro Pastrana of the Mexican Institute of Anthropology and History. His colleague, Rafael Cruz. They have come here to map the locations of ancient mines.
Let's go. Okay, for this side.
Obsidian fragments litter the surface, the refuse of thousands of years of mining activity.
Okay.
The glass that formed here by nature was especially prized by the ancients because of a unique quality.
This obsidian was only formed in this deposit. Most obsidian is black or gray, but the green and the golden green is only from this deposit. It has the finest grain and makes the best blades, but you have to go very deep to get it.
Okay, vas. Okay, vas.
Ahí va, todavía no.
¿Listo? ¿Tienes? Okay.
To learn about ancient mining techniques, Pastrana draws a plan of each mine. This one had a tunnel leading off the central shaft, going deeper into the ground.
Vas viendo el techo. Aquí hay bloques de obsidiana grandes que estos pudieron haber caído. Pero acá hay otros. O sea, hay obsidiana, pero no es más grande que este tamaño. Es decir, que la obsidiana la estaban obteniendo más abajo. Sí, aquí, a ese nivel no obtuvieron obsidiana. Más abajo.
Archaeologists believe the quarrying here was highly organized. After large blocks were extracted from the mines, they were cut down on site to what is called a core.
Es el proceso para...
This is the process for reducing the block.
Reducir el bloque hasta llegar
to get this.
A esto. Estos núcleos son
These were the cores that were transported to Teotihuacan.
At Teotihuacan, the cores were further processed into more uniform cylindrical shapes. Blades were flaked off by pressure from a stick. In the hands of a skilled worker, it was an efficient process. Hundreds of blades could be produced in a short time. The distinctive green knife blades of Teotihuacan have been found in the farthest corners of Mesoamerica, including Copan. Teotihuacan must have been the center of a huge export business. The market was continuous because the blades came only from a few sources and often wore out or broke. The blades were also light and easy to carry, which was important at a time when everything had to be hauled on people's backs. So the obsidian producers of Teotihuacan were able to reach large and distant markets easily. The economy of Teotihuacan was much more complex than Copan's. The city had many specialists, with easy access to an enormous population of consumers within the city, plus an extensive export trade, all supported by efficient agriculture. But this economy could not expand much further because all work had to be done by humans. It took 70% of the population just to feed the city, and transportation was still a problem. The evolution of economic systems carries with it an enormous impact on people's lives. Copan may appear to be a complex city, but in economic terms, it was a place of relative simplicity. It was run by a tiny elite who monopolized the best land and used its small surplus for their own benefit. Teotihuacan was more a true city, where many craft specialists made products for a vast local and export market. The city's economy evolved to become the most complex in the New World.